One of the youngest countries of Europe with one of the oldest histories, the Czech Republic, born in 1993 after the division of Czechoslovakia into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The country of Václav Havel, Knedlíky, Hradčany Castle and the Velvet Revolution. Bordered by Austria, Germany, Poland and Slovakia. Over 10 million people constitute one of the most atheistic societies in the world. The Czech anthem comes from a comedy play, but political problems are more than serious. One of them is the Russian influence and espionage. After World War II, the Czech Republic, similarly to Poland, was in the Soviet sphere of influence. Václav Havel, the country's first post-communist president, established a foreign policy based on human rights, democracy and moral responsibility in international relations. Truth and love must prevail over lies and hatred, he said, and made it a guiding principle for the Czech diplomacy. Those words are even more accurate in 2024.
The author of these words lived here in Prague, the capital of Czechia. Prague is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, starring in countless movies around the world. But its own history is no less dramatic. Just until a few years ago, it was the center of Russian intelligence operations, a playground for transforming a direct control of the Warsaw Pact into a more subtle form of influence. What can Europe learn from the Czech experience today?
We're in Troja Palace, just by the Vltava River, to speak to the Czech people, to politicians, to experts. Many of them are warning we're entering stormy waters in international and regional politics. Growing divisions, political instability and hybrid threats, something Czechia knows a lot about, taking place most of the time in the darkness of digital space. But sometimes it strikes in real life, as it did in Vrtevice. How can we fight battles that we cannot see?
Modern war isn't only about tanks and missiles. It's about what we read, see or hear. Information. Russia has been deploying an arsenal of hybrid threats, from cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns to sabotage. Eastern European countries knew the risks very well, but many Western leaders didn't. Instead, they focused on economic pragmatism until Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Czech Republic, often an unintentional hero of hybrid warfare defense, keeps surprising everyone, including itself. In 2021, Czech investigators discovered that Russian GRU agents were behind an ammunition depot explosion in Vrbětice. Prague had to show Europe how to stand up to the Kremlin. The response was harsh. Czech authorities expelled Russian diplomats and decimated Moscow's regional espionage hub. Despite this moment of glory, the Czech government faces significant challenges now. New institutions like the Government Coordinator for Strategic Communication are still not in full operation. With the government's popularity at historic lows and parliamentary elections approaching, the future of Czech hybrid threat defense hangs in the balance. Would the Czech Republic follow Hungary and Slovakia's path? In both countries, various political actors have become part of Russia's hybrid warfare playbook. This raises a crucial question for all European capitals. How quickly can a country shift from fighting hybrid threats to becoming part of their delivery system? And what can be done to prevent it?
And please join me in welcoming our first guest, and it's Gabriela Svárovská, former diplomat and co-chair of the opposition, the Green Party. Welcome, and nice of you to have joined us. Gabriela, the scale of Russian influence here is really well defined and identified and documented. But let's start with a bit more of a political question. How do you think the situation when it comes to hybrid threats might actually change when Donald Trump assumes office in Washington in a few months? We know they've got a chemistry, sort of political chemistry between him and Vladimir Putin. Are you afraid? What are you expecting?
First of all, Hello, Grzegorz. Thanks for having me. Well, obviously, the result of the election in the United States is raising a lot of concerns, especially among liberals in Europe. We are afraid that this vote might result in strengthening authoritarian tendencies in Europe and around the globe as well. There are multiple concerns, starting with, the continuation of the climate change facing.
So you're expecting things to go for worse rather than for better?
Well, yes, it always depends, on the push and on the counter-push. So I think the response should be like strengthening our society, strengthening our political systems, and strengthening our institutions that would be able to defend democracy.
Yeah. Well, you are well aware of it in the Czech Republic, aren't you? With all those incidents and situations that we've mentioned, Vrtebice, the ammunition depot explosion, the Voice of Europe, and all the... You've got a lot of knowledge on that. How do you think it can be somehow exported to the rest of Europe?
A lot of knowledge going back to the Soviet occupation of 1968. I think the certain sensitivity towards the whole variety of Russian hybrid warfare playbook is important. And obviously, I've been a strong supporter of civil society involvement in all this, and it's important that we cooperate across the region in identifying the disinformation sources and the disinformation narratives, and we cooperate.
Are we doing enough at the moment?
I don't think so. But it's not just that. It's also building overall societal resilience so that people actually believe that the democracy is here for them and is ready to defend them.
You've expelled, quite some time ago, yes, but not so long ago, a large number of Russian spies, diplomats. They were actually diplomats. What kind of change did it bring to this arena in Czechia?
Well, I think it first of all uncovered the issue that the diplomats can actually serve undercover, to different kind of agencies in Russia. It raised the sensitiveness of the society and I'm sure also the particular security agencies. And it, I'm sure, also contributed to their knowledge.
It's quite a firm step to take politically also.
I think it was. And I think, it's really now the time to be alert and see, what kind of push we can get from this side.
In this program, we take questions also from other European countries. And so now the time has come. Let me just bring up a question we got this time, ladies and gentlemen, from Berlin, Barbara von Freitag, expert on Russian influence. Here's the question. Let's take a listen.
This is a question from Berlin, where we are still sleepwalking on many issues, but the Czech Republic has been exposed to hybrid warfare earlier than us, including the big attack on the ammunition depot already 10 years ago. How is the Czech Republic responding to disinformation, cyber attacks, and sabotage on critical infrastructure? Is there new legislation? Is there an agency? Is there a collective public pushback attempt that we can learn from?
The intelligence is quite all right in the Czech Republic about it, but at least a large and serious part of political scene is sort of trying to, just to mention President Zeman, denying the findings of your intelligence. What is the situation here, and what can the rest of Europe learn from the Czech example?
Well, I think this is really a multifaceted task. You have to have the agencies, you have to have the civil society on board, you have to have strong independent media that are able to investigate and properly fact check and debunk disinformation. But you also need to have society that doesn't have doubts about democracy. You have to have, transparency of media ownership. You have to have, strong social and economic policy.
Is actually introducing when it comes to transparency of the media, yes?
Yes, and it is an issue because part of the Russian hybrid warfare playbook is also economic pressure and energy manipulation. So I would end up with transparency of ownership, which is also quite important for implementing sanctions, and energy independence, energy security. And today, we are still by 60% dependent on import of Russian oil, for instance.
Very soon there's going to be a parliamentary election in the Czech Republic. Do you think it will have any influence whatsoever, depending on the results, obviously, on this battle against cyber threats?
Well, it might.
Do you expect to change?
Yes, because the most part of current opposition, including most part of the parliamentary opposition, is part of the very strange European alliance of autocrats, the patriots of Europe. The newly elected MEPs went to this new faction of the European Parliament. So it really raises questions and concerns.
What are you expecting to happen in this case?
In general, the observers and political commentators expect the former prime minister to return.
But when it does happen, what do you expect when it comes to Russian influence, disinformation, and all those hybrid threats?
It remains to be seen because this prime minister was once prime minister already before, and the several steps of the government were not that bad. We put aside former President Zeman. But when it comes to the government, I remember strong statements after the presidential elections in Belarus, for instance. I remember quite strong statements after Vrbětica case. So it really depends on who will be the other coalition parties.
You're a bit worried.
Yes. It's in the current developments in the world, it's good to be worried, good to be concerned, and good to think about counter strategies.
But you mentioned society, you mentioned the people, citizens, whether they have, whether they are aware of the dangers. What do you think? Are people in the Czech Republic, the Czech people basically, are they aware of the possible dangers that might be lurking out there in the cyberspace?
Depends, obviously, which people. Some people are too much worried about their own lives and about their own actually living conditions that they do not really pay much attention to, external threats, which is similar to what actually happened in the United States. Many people voted for Trump, despite the fact he was saying he would destroy the medical care and social security. So people sometimes, act strangely when they are really frustrated.
What does it tell us about modern politics?
It tells us a lot about how actually our democracies deliver to the people, how people feel confident about, their democratic system.
Perhaps the old tools in politics are really gone.
Yes, and we should really, democracy should really deliver a certain living standard for all. So this is part of the society resilience. On the other hand, there are many experts, there are many great think tanks and NGOs and media that are
at it closely,
looking into it very
facts.
closely. Yes.
All right, thank you very much for this opening political part of Capital Questions. We'll continue this point with our next guests who are already here and waiting. But earlier on, we asked the people in the street of Prague if they think hybrid threats are a direct danger to their lives. This is what they said.
I think it's dangerous because Putin wants to restore Soviet Union version 2.0.
When it comes to Russian hacker attacks, they are still active. It is still happening.
I think the main danger is disinformation as a young people, how to find some information with quality,
Here you feel completely safe and it's fine.
I think there might be people who are not maybe that educated, so they will fall for misinformation in any subject, not really just Russia. But
I'm from Ukraine, I live here, and maybe because for me, it's I feel dangerous a little bit here too.
Russia is a powerful country, so it's possible that they are, in a way or another, misleading information. Why not?
This is what the people said. We'll dwell on this topic now. Joining me for this part of the program, Maksym Eristavi, Free Press for Eastern Europe. Welcome to the program. Šimon Pánek, Chief of People in Need organization, but also an activist during the Velvet Revolution. And Andrea Michalcová, Center for an Informed Society and an expert on democracy and populism and hybrid threats. Welcome to all of you. Can we start just by trying to identify what scale of Russian influence and in the media, in the cyberspace, there is at the moment after all those incidents that you've experienced? What's the situation now?
Well, I would say that it's not tragic, it's not lost, but there is a lot of attempt. Russia lost this network of agents. They lost partially some of the allies, very high in the politics, but they invest in some of the disinformation media, to some of the webs.
Can you see it? Are you sensitive to it as an organization? Can you actually identify it now?
Well, for identification, I think we should ask more focused people, but we know that the influence is in Czech, that they are trying to broaden the circuits. For the moment, I would not say that it's tragic, but we still have a year to elections, and of course, the interest of the Russian services, including secret services and foreign service, it's to invest mainly in the periods before the elections, because of course elections can change the...
We just spoke to Gabriela, who was a bit worried about what might come next. Are you worried too?
Yes, I'm worried. I am worried. In the same time, you see the Central Eastern Europe as a broader region, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, that the situation is, let's say, that the democracy is less solid, that it's more fragile than in the west part of Europe. So I am worried, of course. I'm not panicking, but I'm worried.
But you should be, yes, you should be. Andrea, the period before the elections is usually the period that is very sensitive to these actions, sabotage, hybrid threats, and so on and so forth. What's the scale of it from your observations?
Well, I would say that situation is quite alarming. Recently, we at the Center for an Informed Society did an analysis and comparison how governments are coping with hybrid threats in Czech Republic and Slovakia. And the outcomes, what we have is that this government is definitely not doing enough. We have several proofs of direct Russian influence. You mentioned Vrbietice. In the past, like 10 years, there were like several proofs. I have to say that the Czech society, only 3% is pro-Russian.
Okay.
The situation in Slovakia is different. There, the pro-Russian society is nearly 1/3 of the society, and also Slovakia is the most vulnerable country towards conspiracy theories and disinformation. Slovakia
right.
From the European Union, Czech Republic, and its
your neighbors.
Well, of course, and this is alarming also because the disinformation narratives are between our countries, you know, very much of connected, and they are overtaken, but like 1/3 of these narratives are sharing because only on the language proximity. And although this government has stated fight against hybrid threats and disinformation as one of their key priorities, they have done, unfortunately, very less. We have fragmented legal framework. We have vulnerable coordination in institutions. We have processes which are not working, and many other things.
Maksym, your diagnosis?
Well, for me as a journalist, language is exceptionally important. And I actually a bit disagree to call it hybrid threats. If you look back...
It's just a threat.
It's a
substantial
part
threat to
of
democracy.
Russian warfare. If you look back in the history, how all invasions were conducted and what kind of they were executed, disinformation has always been one of the first steps. So in this case, if we don't, even call it the right name, I think this is the necessity to address it is less so. Look, I'm Ukrainian, and when I first time came to Prague 8 years ago to set up Free Press for Eastern Europe together with my colleagues, I was thinking, what can possibly I can be of added value here? I mean, you guys figured it all out. You have democracies, you don't live next to Russia, so probably it's going to be quite an
You were wrong.
I was very wrong, and I'm super worried because now, during the COVID pandemic, and now during the ongoing genocide in Ukraine, all those narratives that Russia was field testing in Ukraine 10, 15 years ago, now I see them here being tested, not only Czech Republic, but all around Central Europe. And my next level of worry is that I don't actually see this cooperation between different parts of the society, civil society, programmatic groups, research.
Why is that? Why is that, do you think?
Well, we're
It might be the reason for it might be politics, because politics sometimes thrives on divisions rather than on unity. That might be one of the reasons.
One of the reasons. The other reason that I sometimes think that people got too comfortable with having freedom, having democracy for that long. So these threats are not treated as serious.
Okay.
But this could be just one of the reasons.
We've got an overview, we've got a diagnosis, but you are actually being so experienced in the Czech Republic, especially in this area. What can you teach the rest of Europe? I've got a quote from Jakub Kaleński, his hybrid center of excellence, who said, if the West had used our experience, the problems that we're facing at the moment would be much, much, much smaller. So let's make it heard by the rest of Europe. How to do it, how to use your experience. What kind of education would you send from Prague to the rest of Europe?
Well, first of all, I think building bridges. This is something exceptionally important. We've just faced a huge crisis with tensions between Roma minority and Ukrainian minority in Czech Republic, where there was a lot of disinformation, including foreign, to fuel polarization with the society even first. And guess what? I was really surprised that when we got together in one room, in a safe, non-public space, governmental officials, civil society organizations, Ukrainians, Roma, and journalists, they all said that they've never done this before, and there was no safe space like that when they can even talk about what is happening at the moment. So building those bridges between civil society actors...
That's a big job.
But it's easier than one might think, because governments come and go, but civil society is the backbone of democracy, and a lot of communication needs to happen there first.
By the way, do you think that the next political change in the next parliament in Czechia might bring a lot of changes when it comes to this, in your opinion?
My job is not to be linked to election cycles, but ensure that whatever happens next, we're still resilient and we still can communicate, and whether government's supportive or not. And we work in countries where government is not supportive of our job, and there still needs to be that system of trust and people working together on this.
Well, you asked how to make the experience transferable. Experience, by definition, it's very difficult to transfer. And the Central Europe, Poles, Czechs, they had their own experience with the Soviet Union.
But we are closer to the problem, yes? The rest of Europe.
Not only we were invaded, in Poland there was a martial law which was basically imposed. They got option, either we will come or you will make it. So we were oppressed for 40 years. Ukraine, of course, it's now the object of brutal aggression, while sitting in Western Europe, most of them believed for decades that through partnership, trade, energy exchange, through, let's say, gentle relations and fair communication, the Russian leadership, which is absurd with Putin, he was educated not to make a friendship and compromise. He was educated either to lose or to win.
Sure. Can I just ask your judgment on the political decisions that are being taken or have been taken regarding disinformation, hybrid threat and so on? Are they, in your opinion, to the point, are they sharp enough?
No, I think no one is doing enough against disinformation. No one, nowhere. I don't know any country.
You think politicians still don't realize how important?
They are realizing, but it's a question of timing and of the speed, and it's so easy to create the waves of lies. And so difficult to stop it and to basically reverse it. And in a post-factic era, the rational discussion sometimes, if it's very emotive, it's
almost impossible. Andrea, you are the Center for Informed Society. How to carry on this mission?
Well, the information space has changed quite a lot. It's very quick. We have many information that society is consuming from the social media, and it prevails. So these tools are also used by mainly populists to get their votes, and they unfortunately prevail in the information space, and quite significantly. We have, I will just give you an example, in like top 10 of the most popular politicians on the social media, on the platform Facebook. We have on the first spot is the Andrej Babiš, the leader of the opposition party ANO, with 6 million of interactions. And then in the top 10, the first non-populist is the president, Petr Pavel, who has 2.5 million of interactions in a year. So these are quite alarming numbers.
Okay, is this a lost battle?
I wouldn't say it's lost, but if you are asking what to do in the prevention, let's say in like before the parliamentary elections we have in like less than a year. So that's very difficult because you have to invest a lot of resources into communication. You have to change the way.
That's a political decision.
That's a political decision, and there is, I would say, still a lack of political understanding.
No, but
for example,
actually, one of you said that the politicians do understand and that they're doing quite a lot. Did I miss?
I mean, I would just specify it. I mean that there is non-understanding on what is strategic communication. Because also nearly a couple of months ago, the government adopted new coordinator of strategic communication under the government office.
Well, can NGOs make up for it or not?
Well, they can, but still the outreach would be much smaller than the outreach of politicians or public institutions. And NGOs are trying to do so, but we as an NGO, we need the help of media, help of influencers, and help of politicians as well.
What's the biggest challenge for you as a representative of Center for the Informed Society for the next year, for 2025? This is going to be really a special year with all the elections and not only that.
Well, if you mean for us, the biggest challenge is to persuade current government to take some actions while they still can, in order, to safeguard democracy.
The present government was actually committed to do it. It came up with different organizations, institutions, and so on and so forth, except they lack some legislative power. We lack execution. We do have the organizations, but they don't have enough power. Is that correct?
Partially. It also took too much time. They rhetorically mentioned that the disinformation is one of the problem, but it took 1.5 years to appoint the first people in the Prime Minister's office. There is a lack of people, capacity, money, lack of legislation. There is not much space within 10 months to change the legislation. But I would not call it lost battle. They can't change Czech Republic for a pro-Russian or partially pro-Russian society.
It's only 3% of the people that are pro-Russian.
They will invest in trying to influence the elections, hoping that some of the newly elected or more strongly elected politicians will be more open towards the different, let's say, friendship, communication, supports, exchanges with Russia, like was President Zeman. So the situation is different than in Slovakia, but it's true that no one, and there are also expertise how to do it. You know, it's not only a question of political will; it's also expertise how to do it in a legislative way, in a legal way, to switch off the web pages without the proper legislative.
Right, can I just dwell on this because you mentioned Slovakia. Why do all of you think it's so different from here?
Well, the society is very different, and the system of democracy in Slovakia is very different. The democratization in Slovakia is still, I would say, on the very beginning, and Russia helped the current prime minister win the elections. So on this, because, well, and it was really the lack of active defense of the state on every level. So it's a completely different situation. I have to say, in Czech Republic not only helps that we have two chambers, we have Senate, we have stronger civil society, we have, I would say, also the Czech television and other things. But some alarming parts are that people, they are not very happy with the developments under 89 and so on.
Right, what's important to discuss here in Prague in particular is the Visegrad Group, once a very effective club. And now, I'm not sure if it's still alive or dead, or perhaps waiting to be resurrected. Let's see what it's all about.
The Visegrad Group was established in 1991 by Czechoslovakia, Hungary and Poland. It soon became a unique bridge between the East and West, showing that Central Europe could follow its own path without Eastern inclinations. The 4 countries after the Czech-Slovak split used the V4 effectively to strengthen their position in Brussels during EU accession talks. The first cracks appeared when Hungary's Orban and Poland's PiS government began challenging EU values. Russia's aggression against Ukraine exposed deeper, perhaps irreparable fractures. The Czech-Slovak relationship, once V4's backbone, hit new lows this year. Slovakian Prime Minister Fico attended a V4 summit in Prague, but his pro-Putin rhetoric created tensions. The Czech government cancelled the traditional joint cabinet meeting with Slovakia, a symbolic cooperation format. Czech leaders are turning to the 3 Seas initiative started by Poland and Croatia to connect 12 EU countries between 3 seas. Meanwhile, Poland has outgrown its V4 siblings, emerging not just as a key supporter of Ukraine, but as an aspiring European power with ambitious military modernization plans and growing geopolitical influence. The Czech elections in 2025 might deliver the final blow. Current polls show the opposition gaining ground. Many fear that they might follow the pro-Russian path we see in Slovakia and Hungary. This would leave Poland increasingly isolated. The V4, which once helped its members join the EU, risks becoming just an empty shell.
Back to our discussion with Maksym Eristavi, Šimon Pánek and Andrea Michalcová. Right. Visegrad Group, is it still alive or is it dying?
It is still alive, but it's more V2 and 2 format now. Whether Slovakia and Hungary are on opposite sides, whether are Czech Republic and Poland in order to, well, at least walk us up to Ukraine and countering hybrid threats coming from Russia.
Should we think about it as a political tool that can be useful or no longer?
I think these tools still can be useful, and Czech Republic and Poland could confront their counterparts on some specific political topics I'd already mentioned. But also, I mean, Czech Republic is looking for different formats for engaging. For example, Slavko format, where they engage with, well, they try to engage with Slovakia and Austria. Let's see how that goes. But also other formats more with Malta and others.
Right. What's your opinion? Because maybe, just speculation, but after the American elections, maybe the situation will change, because we know that Viktor Orban, possibly Fico, will have good relations with the good transatlantic relations, let's call it this way. Maybe it opens new possibilities, sort of a new life to this organization.
Well, I still remember 90s when V4 was co-created and by Václav Havel, being close with him at that time. And I think it was a very nice gesture of 4 countries going together, showing readiness to do some steps even before entering EU, for example. But, well, basically nothing is forever. And now trying to go through Budapest for a better relation with Orban, I don't think so. That is the path which a Czech president would like to use. And I think that he also doesn't need it. So in my opinion, V4 is now should be frozen, and we will see. Let's be pragmatic. In the past,
what instead of it?
When Poland has peace and justice, and Orban was in Hungary, the good thing in Brussels was that the Czechs looks better compared to other countries. But now with Slovakia and the possibly coming elections, you know, I think V4 doesn't work for the moment at all.
Would you agree with that?
I think all these countries still have very important shared story to tell to the rest of even Europe, to the rest of the Western Europe. You mentioned before about the shared story of oppression and Russian occupation, and still lots of these lessons haven't been learned whatsoever, and lots of these lessons are not even obvious to the rest of the Western Europe. We're talking just about Europe.
I know, sorry, but Orban and Fico, it's already saying that the history was different.
Of course.
So you can't pass the, you know, joint story if Orban basically dismissing importance of 56, or Fico basically mentioning 89 as something which was not really important. So we not anymore with the politicians.
With politicians, 100% with politicians. But what I'm excited about, and what we're trying to do, is also to mirror and establish civil society, media networking, those kind of shadow V4 formats, or even in our case, the Central Europe, where we can still keep the momentum going. For example, like we have, some countries where media do not even talk to their governments because of the huge gap. But for example, some of our Romanian partners can log a request for Ministry of Health of the Czech Republic for information that it would never get for their reporting from the Romania. And these networks are actually much more resilient than the politics of the day, which kind of a government is elected.
Do we need any other political format, like the 3 Cs initiative? That's something just sort of cropping up and developing. What do you think about it? Could it substitute the V4?
Well, probably any substitutions related to this collective regional effort to help Ukraine as much as possible on defense, on security, on arms. This is something that we already see happening with the Baltic states, cooperating a lot with Central European countries, because we're having a war happening on our borders, and this affects real-time every country in the region in so many ways, not only disinformation. And there is a lot of job to do already now. Again, disregarding politics, that's the majority of populations who will agree with that.
We've mentioned Hungary quite a few times already in this part of the program. We've got a question from Hungary. Let's take a listen.
Here in Hungary, it's Viktor Orban who is the #1 political player, as prime minister and strongman. And he has a very special regarding Russia and Ukraine. he created a sort of special friendship with President Vladimir Putin, and he's arguing in favor of a peace, a ceasefire, which contradicts to many of the European and global ideas in the liberal world. So what is the reaction of the Czech politicians and the Czech public to these ideas by Orbán?
What is the reaction of Czech politicians and especially the Czech public?
Well, I think the reaction of Czech government and president is clear. We are standing with Ukraine. Ceasefire now means, I would say, brutally injustice, pressure on Ukraine to accept occupation of 20% of their territory. So calling for ceasefire and peace now is basically being Putin's ally. I think it's clear for politicians, for media, and for the part of the public, not for all people, because this narrative, let's stop the war, let's have peace as soon as possible. It will also solve issues connected with inflation, economy, energy, which is of course not true, with immigration. But again, the disinfo scene used or tried to tie these things together, the war and inflation, economical situation, tensions in the societies, and they are partially, I would say, successful. So part of the Czech society is sensitive and listening to this call for immediate ceasefire and immediate peace without really thinking what would that mean. But politically, I think it's still very solid from this country. The Czechs are leaders of an ammunition initiative, the idea
that's been
how
quite
to
famous,
speed up the process of supporting Ukrainian military for defending Ukraine. So I think it's a clear answer.
We just mentioned the topic of Ukraine. I know it's not really the topic of our discussion here, but what do you think might happen now in Ukraine, just to connect it to, again, the American elections? We'll be doing a lot of references to the American elections now.
Look, I think that this is the time of very hard questions and answers that everybody and everyone and every country that supports Ukraine needs to answer right now, and especially European countries, where we lacking in our support, what can be done more, what we can do more. Because, you mentioned President Orbán. I think part of the problem of this kind of narrative and framing that once again, Ukrainians are the ones that outside of this conversation whatsoever. There is this narrative that, big guys will decide everything. We need Putin, Trump, Orbán, whatever, sit at the table and figure out. But at each step of this process, nobody ever asks what Ukrainians want, what Ukraine wants. Ukraine is not often present in these negotiations and these conversations. And then even with the most friendliest governments that we have in Central Europe, in Baltic states, have done enormous job against all odds, against skepticism of Western Europe. Actually, we can see and talk about even dependence on Russian gas and Russian oil, what has happened to that, why there's still money coming from Central Europe back to Kremlin through Russian, for example, shady schemes of supplying gas and oil, and also what we can do to kind of argue and fight more, even with our Western European partners who are still cannot commit 100% to end this. This could be end in a week if everybody commits to the wars that at least they're demanding.
Are you looking at now in 2024 still? Are you looking at 2025 in Czechia with optimism?
Who is looking with optimism to the next year in the Western countries? I think generally the West is in a difficult moment. A bit of internal crisis of a standard political parties system, partially due to disinformation, partially maybe due to the high welfare and extreme comfort in which most of us living. So I would say, let's hope that the next year will not be worse than this one,
And
realistically.
Last words tonight from you, Andrea.
Well, I'm a little bit afraid of what might come in a realistic way, but still, I think that battle is not lost. Well, we have to work on various fronts. We have to invest into our self-defense. We have to cooperate more with our allies within EU and NATO. And what is really important in this quickly changing information space, that we have to focus more on like long-term building trust between the society and the state.
Okay, and we put a full stop here. Thank you very much. Truth and love must prevail over lies and hatred. We started with the words of President Václav Havel. This is not only a message for the Czech people. I've got an impression it's a message for pretty much the whole world today. And it's a challenge for the new leaders of Czechia, whoever is chosen. In a few months' time, Czechs will go to the polls and elect a new parliament, one for challenging times. That's all from us, from Capital Questions here in Prague. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.